Welcome back to Bar Girl Baddies. Today's story is a little different. We're not talking about a young guy chasing bar girls or a digital nomad who lost his savings in 6 months. We're talking about Robert, a 61-year-old retired construction manager from Vancouver who thought he'd figured it all out. He'd done his research, read the forums, joined the Facebook groups, calculated his pension down to the last dollar. He moved to Thailand in 2014 with a solid plan and what he thought was more than enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. 10 years later, he's still here, but the dream looks nothing like what he imagined, and the mistakes he made, the slow financial bleeding that he didn't even notice until it was too late. Those mistakes are the ones that thousands of Western retirees keep making over and over again. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you're retired or planning to retire abroad, hit that like button and subscribe, because this might save you from making the same mistakes Robert did. Robert takes it from here. I'll be honest with you. I thought I had it all figured out. 61 years old, 35 years in construction management, divorce finalised, kids grown and living their own lives in Toronto and Calgary. I was sitting in my paid-off house in East Vancouver, watching the rain come down like it does 9 months out of the year, looking at my property tax bill that had jumped another 12%, and thinking, what the hell am I doing here? I'd worked my whole life. 60-hour weeks were normal, 70 during big projects. I built shopping malls, condo towers, office complexes all over British Columbia. I'd made good money, saved properly, done everything you're supposed to do. And for what? To sit alone in a house that was too big, in a city that was too expensive, watching my retirement funds slowly get eaten by taxes and the cost of just existing. My marriage ended in 2011. Nothing dramatic. Karen and I had been together since we were 23, raised 2 kids, and somewhere along the way we'd just become roommates who occasionally argued about whose turn it was to take out the recycling. She said I worked too much. I said she didn't understand the pressure. Classic stuff. We sold the house we'd raised the kids in, split everything down the middle, stayed civil for the sake of our daughter and son. I bought a smaller place in East Van with my half. She moved to Victoria to be near her sister. The kids called on birthdays and Christmas. Life went on. But God, it was lonely. I'd come home from work, heat up something frozen, watch TV shows I didn't care about, go to bed, wake up, do it again. Weekends were worse. I'd do yard work, go to the hardware store, maybe grab a beer at the pub where I didn't really know anyone anymore. My old friends were all coupled up, busy with grandkids, living lives that didn't have much room for a divorced guy who worked all the time. I wasn't depressed exactly, but I wasn't happy either. I was just existing, watching the clock tick down to full retirement, wondering if this was really all there was. I started researching retirement abroad around 2012. Started innocently enough, just curiosity. I'd read an article in the Globe and Mail about Canadians retiring in Mexico, Portugal, Thailand. The cost of living comparisons were eye-opening. What I was spending on property taxes alone in Vancouver could cover rent for a nice place in Chiang Mai for a year. I fell down the rabbit hole. Expat forums, retirement blogs, YouTube channels run by guys my age who'd made the move and were documenting their lives. They'd show their apartments with views of mountains or beaches, their meals that cost $3, their evenings out where a beer was $1.50. Thailand's kept coming up. The weather was warm year-round. The healthcare was surprisingly good and affordable. The people were friendly. The food was incredible. And the cost of living, Jesus. The cost of living was a fraction of Canada. I joined Facebook groups, Thailand retirement, Chiang Mai expats, Vancouver to Thailand, groups with thousands of members all sharing tips and photos and encouragement. I read every post. I made spreadsheets. I wasn't some impulsive kid. I was a project manager. I knew how to plan. The numbers looked solid. I had my company pension, about 2,200 Canadian a month. My CPP would kick in at 65, another 1,000 a month. Old age security eventually, another 600. Plus, I had savings and investments and the house. I ran scenarios. If I sold the house, I'd clear about 800,000 after paying off the tiny mortgage I'd taken to buy out Karen's half, 800,000 Canadian. At a conservative 4% return, that was 32,000 a year I could draw without touching the principal. Combined with my pensions, I'd have over 60,000 Canadian coming in annually. In Thailand, with the exchange rate at 33 baht to the dollar back then, that translated to about 160,000 baht a month. Every article I read, Every expat I talked to online said you could live well in Thailand on 40 to 60,000 baht a month. Really well. Nice apartment, eat out regularly, travel, have a social life, save money. I'd have nearly 3 times that. I'd be rich by Thai standards, set for life. I visited Thailand twice before making the move. First time in early 2013, 2-week trip, stayed in Bangkok and Chiang Mai. I loved it immediately. The heat felt good on my joints after decades of damp Vancouver cold. The food was incredible, so much flavour, so much variety, and you could eat like a king for pocket change. I got a full hour massage for 300 baht, about $9 Canadian, and it was better than any physiotherapy I'd paid 150 bucks for back home. People smiled at me everywhere I went. Shopkeepers, taxi drivers, people on the street. In Vancouver, everyone walked around looking at their phones. Nobody made eye contact. The vibe was just grey and isolated. Here, life felt warmer somehow. Second trip was 6 months later, longer this time, 3 weeks, really trying to see if I could live there. I rented a serviced apartment in Niman, the trendy area of Chiang Mai, went to expat meetups at coffee shops, talked to guys who'd already made the move. They all said the same things. Best decision they'd ever made. Wished they'd done it sooner. The key was having enough money to be comfortable, but not so much that you became a target. Be smart, be respectful, learn some Thai, don't be a cheap Charlie, but don't be a walking ATM either. I could do that. I'd been managing budgets and people for 30 years. I made my decision in December 2013, told my kids over Christmas dinner. They thought I was having a midlife crisis 15 years late. My son David said, "Dad, you don't even speak Thai. What are you going to do there?" My daughter Lisa was more supportive but worried. She said, "What if you get sick? What if something happens? We're so far away." I told them I'd thought it through. I had health insurance sorted. I'd visit Canada every year. They could visit me. I could see they weren't convinced, but they were adults with their own lives. They weren't going to stop me. My mother, God bless her, she was 86 and living in a care home in Burnaby. She cried when I told her. Said I was abandoning the family, moving to the other side of the world when she didn't have much time left. That hurt. But she had round-the-clock care. My sister lived 20 minutes away and visited 3 times a week. I'd visit before I left, and I'd come back regularly. I couldn't put my life on hold indefinitely. She stopped crying eventually, said she just wanted me to be happy, but I could tell she didn't understand. I listed the house in February 2014, sold in 3 weeks for 820,000, which was more than I'd expected. Paid off the mortgage, paid the realtor, walked away with 790,000. I opened a Thai bank account during my last visit, transferred 50,000 Canadian to start, about $1.5 million baht, enough to cover my first 6 months easily while I got settled. The rest I kept in Canadian investments, mix of index funds and GICs, conservative stuff that would generate steady income. I gave notice at work. My boss, a guy 10 years younger than me who I'd trained when he started, he tried to talk me out of it, said I could consult part-time, stay involved, keep busy. But I was done. Done with the stress, the deadlines, the office politics, the Vancouver traffic, all of it. I wanted to wake up and not have anywhere I had to be. I wanted to sit at a cafe for 3 hours reading a book and not feel guilty about it. I wanted warm weather and cheap food and a slower pace of life. I packed 2 big suitcases with clothes, my laptop, some photos of the kids, sold or donated most of my furniture, gave my car to David, booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok, connecting to Chiang Mai, leaving April 15, 2014. The week before I left, I had a going-away dinner with a few old work friends at a pub on Main Street. They joked about me becoming a beach bum, asked if I was going to get a Thai girlfriend, made the usual comments. I laughed it off. Told them I was doing this for me, not for women, not to escape, just to have a better quality of life with the money I'd worked hard to save. The night before my flight, I sat in the empty house. Everything I owned, either sold or packed, and I felt this mix of excitement and terror. I was 61 years old, and I was starting over in a country where I didn't speak the language, didn't know anyone beyond casual acquaintances from those 2 visits, didn't have a job or a routine or any real plan beyond live cheap and enjoy yourself. But I also felt more alive than I had in years, like I was finally doing something just for me. The flight was long. Vancouver to Bangkok, 14 hours, then a short hop to Chiang Mai. I arrived late afternoon, the heat hitting me like a physical thing when I stepped out of the air-conditioned airport. Thick, wet heat that made my shirt stick to my back immediately. But I loved it. I'd arranged to pick up through my hotel, a small place near the old city that catered to long-term expat guests. The driver barely spoke English, but he smiled a lot, loaded my bags, and we drove through the city in late afternoon traffic. Chiang Mai wasn't Bangkok. It was smaller, more manageable. You could see the mountains in the distance. The old city was surrounded by a moat and ancient walls, temples with golden spires everywhere. Outside the old city, the streets were a mix of local shops, tourist businesses, coffee shops, restaurants, motorbikes everywhere, weaving through traffic like schools of fish. The air smelled like exhaust and street food and incense from the temples. It felt foreign but not threatening. It felt like maybe I could build a life here. My hotel room was small but clean. Air conditioning, decent bed, little balcony overlooking the street. I unpacked, took a shower, changed into lighter clothes, and walked out into my new neighborhood. It was dusk, that golden hour before the sun fully sets. I found a small restaurant with plastic stools and no English menu, pointed at what someone else was eating, some kind of curry with rice. The woman running the place smiled and nodded, brought me food 10 minutes later. It was delicious. Spicy, complex, nothing like Thai food back in Canada. The bill was 70 baht, less than $3 Canadian. I sat there eating and watching people go by and thought, I've actually done it. I'd actually changed my life. The first few weeks were an adjustment. I extended my hotel stay to a month while I looked for a proper place to rent. I bought a used Toyota from another expat who was moving back to Australia, 15 years old, but solid, passed the inspection. Cost me 180,000 baht, about 5,500 Canadian, which seemed reasonable. I explored the city, went to expat coffee meetups every week, started making friends. Other retired guys mostly, Australians, Americans, Brits, a few Canadians. We'd sit at cafes and compare notes on visa stuff, healthcare, good mechanics, where to get decent Western food when you had a craving. I found a house to rent in June, 2 months after arriving. 2 bedrooms, small garden, in a neighbourhood called Santitham, just outside the old city. Walking distance to good restaurants, a fresh market, the riverside. The landlord wanted 15,000 baht a month, about 450 Canadian. Seemed like a steal, compared to the 2,000 a month I'd been paying in Vancouver property taxes alone. The house was furnished, had air conditioning in both bedrooms, a Western kitchen with an oven which was apparently rare. I signed a 1-year lease, paid first month, last month, and a deposit. Moved in a week later. This was it. This was the dream I'd been planning for 2 years. I had a house, a car, money in the bank, my pension depositing every month. I'd wake up when I wanted, make coffee, sit in my little garden watching the geckos hunt insects, feeling the warm morning air. I'd go to the gym, a local place that cost 300 baht a month, about $9. I'd eat lunch at street stalls or small restaurants, 50 to 80 baht a meal. I'd read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I'd explore temples, drive up to the mountains, visit the night markets. I met up with my expat crew regularly. There was Graham, a Brit my age, former accountant, living in a condo in Nimon. He'd been here 3 years already and knew all the ins and outs. There was Frank and Joanne, an American couple in their late 60s, retired teachers from California, living in a house near mine. There was Bruce, an Australian, 65. Bit rough around the edges, but good company, always had stories from his years working oil rigs. We'd meet for coffee in the mornings, or for dinner and drinks in the evenings, rotating between our favourite spots. We talked about how good we had it, how our money went so much further here, how the weather was perfect, how we'd never go back to the West with its high costs and bad weather and stressful pace. We felt like we'd figured out a secret that most people would never know. We felt smart. But even in those first months, I was spending more than I'd planned. The spreadsheet back in Vancouver had been theoretical. Reality was different. The house was 15,000, but electricity ran high because I had the AC on most of the day. Some months it was 2,000 baht, sometimes more. Water, internet, that was another 800 or so. The car needed regular maintenance, needed insurance, needed registration renewed. Gas wasn't as cheap as I'd thought. I was driving more than I'd planned, day trips to Pai, to Chiang Rai, to the beaches down south. And I was eating out more than the spreadsheet had budgeted. Not at expensive places, just regular restaurants, but 3 meals a day out adds up. I'd budgeted maybe 200 baht a day for food, 6,000 a month. I was spending closer to 400 a day, 12,000 a month. And drinks with the guys. We'd go to a bar, everyone would buy rounds, I'd end up spending 1,000 baht on beer, and it didn't feel like much, but it was 3 or 4 times a week. I checked my Thai bank account at the end of my first 3 months, and I'd spent about 120,000 baht. About 3,600 Canadian. My pension was depositing 2,200 a month, which was about 73,000 baht at the current exchange rate. I was in the red by almost 50,000 baht for the quarter. Not a crisis. I'd budgeted for higher expenses at the start, settling in costs. But it was more than I'd expected. I transferred another 20,000 Canadian from my investment account to top up the Thai account. Told myself it was a one-time thing, just initial setup costs. It would level out. That's what I told myself. It would level out. Things would get cheaper once I found my rhythm. Once I stopped acting like a tourist and started acting like a resident. Spoiler alert. It didn't level out. It got worse, but I didn't see it coming. None of us ever do.